G'day guys, Mac with the Outer Circle, and the other day I was talking about the Kytus Nex model that you see before you, and I was mentioning how the descriptions of the character are very different to the character that we actually got, and how the sculpt itself can tell us so much about a character just by looking at them. You can just sort of get an understanding due to their posing, their particular stylings, and how I felt this character in particular didn't match his description. Not that it was a bad model, but that it was a bad model for that character. And there's some interesting comments in there along the way about how, people thought that it looked great, the armor, how it suited the character, that kind of thing. Other people talking about how, well, he isn't even in Artificer armor, he's actually just in regular power armor, so why would he be so blingy? Some talking about how bulky he feels, some talking about how nonchalant the pose is, most people hating the head for the character, etc., right? Especially when they talk about how sort of blatant it is, having the picture, the artwork right here of what he's supposed to look like next to this completely different character. So, to start with, let's talk about what this character is like, and then we'll go into some other examples, both good and bad. Some are just generic HQ choices. I've got one of those in here, and then I've got a few of my favourite characters, and some that are not so good as well, that we can talk about, and talk about what does and doesn't work that really makes the inner character sort of just jump out at you, where you can just look at a miniature and say you know or you understand it intrinsically. So, Kytus Nex is a murderer. He's imprisoned on the prison moon of Deliverance. It's not called Deliverance until Corax takes it over, but essentially he's a prisoner, and he's there for murder. And Corax does not commute his death sentence for murder. He did kill people, and he is still a vicious psychopath murderer. He's just doing it for the Raven Guard now as a Moritat. The Raven Guard are famous for their austerity and their Spartan living conditions because, well, they all grew up in a prison, and therefore they're used to sort of concrete walls and barren, empty cells, scrounging for equipment and just living like sort of rats in tunnels. And Kytus is exactly that, but also a psychopath. And he wears plain, basic armor, and his role is simply to kill for his Primarch, until such time as he himself is killed, and that is his penance for the crimes he committed in his former life. Cool. None of that is shown here. We don't get the soulless blank stare of the murderer, he is almost looking into your eyes, and you see it in the artwork. Like, there's just something brutal about him. The prison tattoos, the gang sigils, the carvings that are in his armor. There's something about him, right? The just number 2 buzz cut sort of to the hair that you see, the torn ears where, he's been in fight, maybe someone's bitten his ear or it's been cut off, prison shanked, who knows what, right? But that's very much a part of the character, and you get none of it here. So where else do we see this sort of design language in the Horus Heresy system? So I thought, let's take Alexis Pollux. Alexis Pollux is sort of, I think, one of the coolest characters we've got in the Horus Heresy, and has been a staple of many great conversions over the years. His armor is clearly Mark III, but it's also different, and that's okay because he's a larger character than most people in the Astartes in this time period. He's actually sort of a half a head to a head taller than most other Marines around him. He's considered a giant of an Astartes. And you look at his pose. He's bellowing almost like he is yelling out a challenge to someone. He's also standing there sort of foot up, treading onto the stairs with the fallen Iron Warrior's banner. There are spare bolt shells scattered all around him, so you can tell he has just been in combat. And yet, he himself is relatively unmarked, unscarred from this combat. He looks like he's in good condition. And yet, at the same time as he's sort of bellowing out a challenge, you can see this sort of stoicism about the character in the way that he's posed, the way the shield is not being held up in a very guarded position like he's letting it down, as if to say, I do not fear your bolt gun shells, take your best shot at me, right? The design language of the miniature is wonderful, and that's why so many people have used this for conversions, because if you want to portray a stoic sort of badass, that tempered rage that's just being held in check, that, he's ready for more, this is a fantastic miniature to use as a base point. Another character who sort of falls into this territory is we have Eidolon, Eidolon of the Emperor's Children here. This sort of sneering look of him, the arrogance that is there, the fact that he doesn't feel the need to even hold his hammer up and guard himself. His arms are basically by the side, like he doesn't even see you as a threat. He's just like, whatever, I don't even need to protect myself against you. I don't need to take up a defensive posture. And you kind of see that in him. You also see the richness of the armor, the inlays on it, that clearly this is someone of status. The two knives that are also hanging from the belt there, it suggests that this is a guy who loves his blades. If you get in close, he's probably going to fight you. Like, there's a hidden veiled threat. And the fact that he has those two sort of paired knives, but he's also wielding this clawed, dangerous looking hammer, is telling you a lot about the character. Then, of course, you also have all these sonic speakers that are up on top of the backpack and, of course, right in front of the face. So the position of it on the torso in front of the face is telling you this is important, right? This is center on the model. So this is central to what this miniature can do. The sheer amount of bling and iconography is telling you that this is a character. The fact that he still has this pristine cloak billowing behind him, it's not torn, it's not made of furs, this is not a primitive barbarian. This is a man who's wearing fine silks. And a lot of this is just told to you through the miniature. You don't need to know anything about the character of Eidolon. You don't need to be told that this is the Lord Commander. You can just look at him and go, okay, this guy is clearly some kind of a badass. I'm not sure why, but I just intrinsically know it. And then you put those little pieces together. As Red Letter Media would say, you might not have noticed, but your brain did. Then we have another character. Let's take Magistus Amon. Amon here, okay, he's painted with a bit of a rat's face. Let's ignore the paint job for a moment, but have a look at the character himself. He is running over the rubble, the ruins of the city around him. Let's get a bit of a 3D look at him. He has robes over his power armor, and it's not just a cloak, it's robes that's coming down the forearms. And his weapon is not a sword, it's a staff, a crooked staff. Straight away with that and the alternating color scheme, the stripes going along the arms and armor, you can tell it has a sort of pseudo-Egyptian theme to it, right? The eye motifs and the wings and such across the torso, again, that Egyptian motif. You don't even need to see this model in color to immediately pick up those vibes. Then you look around the model some more. He has books and scrolls. So you go, hang on a minute. We're seeing books, we're seeing scrolls, we're seeing a staff. Clearly, this is a wizard. Okay? You don't need any more than that. This is a wizard. And then you see the eyes, the gemstones and such, the little trinkets like potions hanging off the staff. These are all symbols of someone who's a bit tricksy, wizardry nature. And yet, the way he's rushing forward also suggests a hidden aggressiveness. Like, this is a guy who can handle himself. This is not the kind of wizard who is sitting back, just casting his spells and cowering from the enemy. This guy's rushing forward with the barbarian in the party, right? He's going to be the second one into close combat. And this is, again, all told to you through the posing. The dashing forwards with the miniature, and of course it matches the descriptions pretty well of the actual character. And the paint job, okay, a little bit ratty looking in the face, but the tattoos and such enhances this. Then you have a bad one. Dominion Zephon is the one I've picked here. We do have a 3D view of it, but obviously the first thing you're going to say is, why is he Mark 6 power armor? All of the descriptions we have of him are in different power armor, namely Mark 3. We get a long description of the character in Aramdevsky Bowden's Master of Mankind. We're told what power armor he's in, we're told the shape of the visor on his helmet, all sorts of stuff. We're told how much bionics he has, and where, and to what extent. So none of that is particularly great. What about the miniature itself and the posing? Well, the posing is only telling us that this is a guy of some aggression in that he's rushing forward, but we don't have a true face to put there unless you go for the bare head. And the bare head in this instance is kind of, well, let's face it, it's plastic and crap. you don't have the same depth of character to that plastic face. It's not that it's impossible to get that kind of depth, but you're relying a lot more on the artist to bring it out with paint as opposed to what's naturally in the sculpt. That's one of the few things that resin does well, because it's a flexible molding material in the silicon that's used, as opposed to a rigid aluminium or a steel in the dyes that are used for plastic. So at the most, you get an aggression to the character. And that's really what this seems to be trying to tell you. This character is almost jumping, leaping, flying towards you in an aggressive stance. Sure. But then let's compare and contrast that. Let's use Khan the Bloody here as an example, because it's almost an identical pose. They're both leaping off that right foot kind of towards you as you're looking at them. They've got that, the left foot is planted on the ground, the right foot, the right knee is drawn up. Khan has the weapon swung to the rear, as in he's just taken a swing and he's about to bring it back. Dominion Zephon, he is as if pulling the weapon back, ready to strike. Both of them in their helmet. In Khan's helmet, you have this sneer to the face, the snarling look of the helmet itself. It's sculpted into it. Like, it looks like an angry face on the helmet itself. And the armor is very Spartan. It's got this sort of hinting of musculature to the torso, and of course the bare exposed arms, the spikes coming out of the armor is a very aggressive look. The chains, of course, chains wrapped around the fist and forearm, are always something that suggests a certain level of menace or aggression to a character. Dominion Zephon doesn't have that. He's wearing rather, regal and rich armor. And then when you look at their faces, Zephon, when you do see his face, is just an angry vampiric face. But that's not really the character of Zephon. He is not an angry berserker leaping into battle. He's actually quite a thoughtful character. Khan, on the other hand, when you look at his face, somewhere down through all these pictures, you can see that he's sneering. His teeth are gritted together. There's anger in there. There are scars down his face. This is a guy who has seen combat. His hair is unkempt, unruly, right? Again, suggesting he doesn't care. He just hacks away, even at his own hair, just like he would hack away at those around him. And of course, the power cabling in place of true hair, which again, is mutilated. You can see it physically embodied. Every part of this character is leaning into the aspect of rage. But Dominion Zephon, if you did not know this character, you would just think that, okay, this is a close combat guy who is diving to get to the enemy, and when you do see his face, you go, well, he's angry, he hates his enemies, and that's why he's lunging at them. This is an aggressive character. And he's not at all. So the armor cues here, apart from being all wrong for the description of the character, the armor cues are telling you the wrong thing about the character. And of course, despite him being very aggressive, which many Blood Angels characters of course are, he's very soft. Lots of soft, round shapes to him. Soft gemstones, soft, round face. The shape of the beaky helmet is not a particularly aggressive point. It's not sharp-edged. It is very circular nose cone, as opposed to a sort of pyramidal nose cone like you see on some of the beaky upgrade helmets. There are no spikes or anything like that on the shoulder pads or on the armor. It's all very smooth, very cylindrical, very mundane. And you can even compare this with other Blood Angels characters. First, we got Dante. Dante obviously has an axe. The axe is a very sharp, very aggressive weapon. The axe is always considered more brutal than the graceful sword. With the posing of Dante as well, you can see in the face of Dante, that there is something more to this death mask. It's not a flat face that's telling you nothing. You can see that this guy has a certain air about him. He's almost like he's leaping out of a Renaissance art piece. Then you've got someone like Mephiston. Also has the angry rage face, yes, but also there's more about him. The way that the cloak is billowing, almost as if it's billowing in the wind, that classic sort of artwork, the vampiric look about him. But you've got the sword. The sword is very aggressive. Serrations, spikes, things like that. Even the armor, look at the nacelles on the backpack in the background. You can see little spiky rivets running down it. There are sharp edges to the character. The syringes dangling off the belt, right? With the blood in them. Again, sharp, aggressive. The way the cloak comes out and ends in points, okay? Constant points. sharp edges, an aggressive edge to the character is just being told to you through the look. The way that it's used, I think, is quite smart here. Whereas in Zephon, if you didn't know the character, you would just assume it was a generic chargy Blood Angels boy. And it does not make a great character, therefore. Now, getting back to great characters, Sevatar. Sevatar, and whenever I look at this model, I immediately think of Shang Tsung, get over here, I'm going to take your soul, right? It doesn't even say get over here, I don't know why I said that, he will steal your soul, right? That Shang Tsung look is very much what is going on here. The sneering aggression of the face mask, the blade that he's holding in his hand, this dagger, he's almost pointing at you, index finger pointing at you, but he's also holding a bloodied, very sharp, very aggressive knife in that hand. He is pointing at you, telling you, you are next. What I did to this guy at my feet, I am going to do to you. And then further reinforced by the fact that, well, he's a bloody Night Lord, so, I mean, it's in the name, covered in bits of flesh and tapestries, of skin, right? If you look at the cloak itself going around the back of him, it is, cloth, but with bits of tattered flesh attached and stitched into it. Kind of, see if I can get a better, closer view. There you go. So, tapestry of flesh, bloodied still, and just crudely sewn together. There are trinkets from other legions in there, like the little bit of Dark Angel's winglet. Like, he is making trophies of other people and other legions. There's a history to this character being told to you just looking at him. The aggressive shape of all of the bat's wings on him, they're not soft and rounded, they are very, very aggressive. A lot is being told to you. His armor, okay, it's got hints of Mark 6 power armor to it, which is great, but they're not just curving shins, they have a sharp sort of central point along the shins, and then of course the shins culminate in a sharp kneecap. So he is literally sharp as a character. And of course, on the backpack, there's skulls and things like that tied in with leather and other organic materials. His face, when you do see it, is this sneering, scarred, ruined visage. It's fantastic storytelling of a character. You've got other characters like Nathaniel Garrow, who, fits his descriptions well. We're told about the golden eagle cuirass that he wears on the chest, this ornamentation, and how it's been passed down to the 7th captain through the Death Guard since they were the Dusk Raiders back on Terra, and the Sword Libertas, and the fact that he has a bionic right leg, which you can see underneath the Mark 6 power armor. By the way, this is probably the most gorgeous rendition of the Mark 6 power armor, I think, especially the shoulders. And the face, stoic, scarred, he's been through a lot, right? But he's not showing any emotion. He's just gritted, determined, focused single-handedly on the goal he is undertaking. These are the kind of traits we like in our characters. And this miniature pulls it off so well, so effortlessly for me. So that's there. And the fact that, he has got the Galvorback, the dangerous, dreaded, large, twisted, monstrous Galvorback, and he is just standing on its ruined husk. It's at his feet. Like, he has already dealt with that. And that demonic ruined thing does not faze him. He is still just blank-faced, gritted, determined. It's telling you a lot about the character. The fact that he's just crushing it beneath his foot. He's not even looking down at it, sneering at it in contempt or anything like that. He's not like a Sevatar, where Sevatar is looking down, sneering down at those around him. It's the polar opposite of that. Nathaniel Garrow could not care less. It's dead, job's done, moving on to the next job. Okay? Polar opposite characters, and it's told to you just through the styling and the pose. It's wonderful. And the last one I'm going to finish out with here is the Sons of Horus Legion Cataphractii Praetor. Just a stock, bog, generic Praetor, right? Wrong. It tells you a lot. You look at this character, you see someone who is striding forward, but they're striding, the face is in line with the knee, determined, looking in that direction. The arms, the wide stance, like he's carrying 2 eskies underneath. Either he's a bodybuilder with ego issues, or the guy is being very aggressive and trying to dominate the room, like an animal rearing up, a cobra expanding its hood to say, I'm a dangerous creature, when the fur goes up on dogs and other animals, right? Trying to make himself appear larger to his enemies, intimidating them. Okay? The choice of the leather and the sharp edges and the hooks, it lends it to that aggression. The skull trophies, this guy is a killer, he's a murderer, right? The fact that he has the wolf's pelt on there, we associate furs with a certain level of barbarity, or, rich 70-year-old New York heiresses or something. We don't associate fur with, the mundane. We think of it as like Vikings and, things to that effect. It's something archaic, something more brutal. We've moved beyond that as a species. We use synthetic fibers, right? No. That's what nylon and, polyester were invented for. That's the sort of way that we think as people. You might not notice it, but your brain does. You've got the little sigils carved into the armor that's telling you things about the character, good things about the character. A certain level of information that it gives you just looking at this. The flanging on the mace, very emblematic of his Primarch, right? So there's a continuity there. The fact that he has such strong iconography tells you a lot about the character. So even not being a special character, the same design philosophy, the same design cues are carried across really flawlessly, I think, here. But yeah, so anyway, that's what I think a lot of characters can tell you about them just by looking at them, and how when you get a sculpt wrong, it sort of does a disservice to what it's really trying to convey, especially in cases where it's a named character, a special character, and someone with a either established artwork or a really strong established background and personality. I'm not saying that you should be rigidly locked into, you must adhere 100% to exactly this look, but when you take great creative liberties for no really logical reason that people can't just put together, it doesn't really work. That's where, again, not to harp on the point, something like a Kaidi's Next does not work. This was a, fleshed out enough character. We understood everything that we needed to about the character. It's quite beloved in Raven Guard circles, and there are people who are going to love it as it is, who like the idea of that bulkier, more up-armored character, and that suits their tastes, their tendencies. Totally cool with that, right? But also, you've got to be understanding, if you are in that boat, that some people want it to stick to the more true representations that we should be expecting, and how it does generate some sort of rage and confusion when you are told that you're getting one thing and you get another. That tends to leave a bitter taste in some people's mouths. But if you do like this sort of character, that's great. I'm happy for you, and I do not want to change your mind. That is not the point of the episode. I get, frankly, nothing out of achieving that. I don't sit there chalking up another win on the chalkboard here. But it's more just to talk about, if you're converting, if you're building, if you are designing, think about these things when you're trying to create your character. If you're putting in aggressive posing, you are suggesting an aggressive character. If you're putting in very stoic posing, well, you're suggesting a stoic character. If you have stoic posing and a blank stare on their face like this character, you're not going to suggest someone who is a vicious murderer springing into the fight, are you? And this is a great example of that. Anyway, that's it for me. I'm Mac with the Outer Circle. Thank you all for watching. Thoughts and comments below, and I'll see you on the next one.